When my dad passed, I really learned to not ever leave anything unsaid that means something to you. I had never experienced such an intense feeling of empowerment like through the death of my husband. All of a sudden, being solely responsible for those two beautiful young lives we have created together. But back then I thought, who am I, to change the world in the world of grief? Who am I to teach somebody something? Life's just way too precious to get hung up on a tucked in or hung out shirt, In every single second or moment of your life, you have the choice whether you focus on the positive or the negative.
Welcome to Mission Activated, where we bring you the stories of individuals who've awakened to their true purpose and are living a life of passion, impact, and alignment. I'm Aveline Clarke, your host, and I believe that when you're on mission, everything falls into place. Here, we share the journeys of those who've discovered their unique path and embraced their soul's calling. It's not just about making money in life and in business, it's about making a difference, living on purpose, and inspiring yourself and others along the way. Let's get to it. This conversation is with a beautiful woman who went through an unimaginable journey, and she shares that journey with me, which really touched me to my core. It also highlights how life's bumps, twists and turns can highlight for us who we really are and who we're meant to be, and offer us an opportunity to reinvent ourselves. And she has done it beautifully. It's a very raw, very vulnerable conversation. I'm really grateful to Marie for opening up to me and sharing all about herself and how she navigated such a difficult time. And I love seeing people on purpose, and she is living her purpose through the tragedy and the devastation that she went through. We all have different journeys, and this one is Marie's. Enjoy. Hello, Marie, and welcome to the podcast. It's so good to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited about this.
I am too. When I met you, I was just so delighted, meeting someone who is just living their purpose, their soul's mission. And it's just so clear that you're in joy. You've got this state of joyfulness and happiness exuding from your skin, your eyes. Anyway, I could keep going, but I
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I'm just really happy you're here. So yeah, thank you.
Me too.
Well,
thank you.
Tell me, whereabouts are you? Where are you calling in from?
I'm in a small town just south of Sydney called Helensburgh. Some of you might know it. So it's the beginning of the beautiful South Coast. I love it here.
Oh, wonderful. Nice. And tell me, what is it? Who do you serve in the world?
I have made it my mission to help people heal their grief. We live in a society where there are a lot of myths around grief, and one of them being that is something that will last forever. I have a slightly different approach, and I'm very excited about unpacking that with you today.
Wonderful. I am too. Really am. I'm looking forward to all of that. Now, that's a very unique skill set, a unique craft, and it's not something that you just suddenly fell into or stumbled upon. I would really be intrigued and grateful if you could share with me the journey that you've been on that's brought you to where you are today in delivering that craft.
Aveline, you already know it's not a one-word answer, so I will take a couple of minutes for a nutshell version of that, and then I'm more than happy to go into more detail. I believe it all probably started when I was 20. My dad passed from cancer at that time, and I was really not equipped to deal with that back then. I had no idea how to handle grief, how to deal without my dad all of a sudden, and I truly felt I was the only one that this happened to. And it truly felt like that in my circle of friends. But, the more you deal with the topic of grief, the more you realize what the statistics are, how many people are out there who are actually dealing with that. And one thing that I decades later then learned to refer to as a hidden gift in adversity was when my dad passed. I really learned to not ever leave anything unsaid that means something to you. And I learned that the very hard way. I really made it my mission to, when there was something on my heart, in particular when it was something positive, something beautiful, to tell people. I mean, I'm one of those people who runs around on the streets and go like, "Oh, I really like your dress," or "Oh, those shoes are so beautiful," or "Oh my God, that brightens your smile." I just keep telling people all the time, absolute strangers. My boys are so used to it now, but this is me, and this is also how I lived my life and my relationship when I met Rob, my husband. And I consider myself extremely lucky that we had a relationship like that, where I left nothing unsaid, nothing unlived, nothing unexpressed, if that makes sense. And luckily, we were both built that way. We were both really living a relationship with no regrets. And the reason I am using past tense here is Rob passed away in June 2018. And it was completely unexpected. It was not like he had cancer like my dad, and there was a build up to it. He went on a business trip and never came home. And the boys were 10 and 8 at the time, and Rob passed from a brain aneurysm. So it was instant, just like that. What people didn't expect was that, I guess it was pretty much from my previous not knowing how to deal with that. Rob and I were lucky enough to have the what if conversation, and that was probably about 3 years before he passed. And in that what if conversation, we had this: if something was to happen to me, I would want you to create the happiest life possible for the boys and you. So to me, it was love is simple. Love just wants you to be happy. And we loved each other so much that I just wanted Rob to be happy if something was to happen to me. And the same for him. And when I received that phone call from a sergeant from the coroner's office in Perth, because Rob was across the country on a business trip, I had his voice in my head. It was exactly what I had in my head, take the voice and create the happiest life possible. I had no idea how to do that at first, but it became my North Star. It became my lighthouse in my darkest hour. I had to tell the boys, which was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life. And from there on, I made the decision that I would steer my path towards happiness with everything I have, no matter how, no matter what. That was the sort of starting point to everything. I don't know if you have any questions at this point, or if you want me to continue what I did with that, but yeah.
I do. Thank you. Wow. First of all, thank you for sharing that. Um, Even though I'd heard that before, it still brought, tears up to my eyes, just the feeling of that event and what that would do to me. So I do have a question. When you and Rob had that what if question, that conversation, where did that come from? Was that part of your journey having
Yeah,
lost your dad?
not that one. I actually have to say that came from a completely different scenario. Rob actually called me that day, and he was just like, "Babe, I'm going to be 2 hours late from work because there was an accident on Heathcote Road." And everybody who lives in this area knows Heathcote Road is a one way, no way out kind of road through the national park. So if there is an accident, it means at least a 2 hour detour. And a 2 hour detour is a huge inconvenience for most families that are waiting for that to come home for dinner, or, if there were any plans, it can be a huge inconvenience. Yet for one young family, it meant that their dad never made it home. So a young woman lost her husband. Their baby was only 6 months old. That's what we learned later. And it really hit home, as you just said. You heard my story before, but when you're a mom, when you're a parent, and you hear a story like that, it really hits you differently, in particular when you have kids a similar age. I mean, our kids were a little bit older at that stage, but still, we sat on our bed that night and we had that conversation. What would you do if you would receive that phone call? What would I do? And it it was a theory conversation, but it didn't feel like theory because it just had happened to somebody, and that really hit home for us. So that's what caused that conversation. And I'm so grateful we had that conversation. And every time I talk, whether that be on stage or right now in a podcast, I really want to urge people to have that conversation. I understand how confronting it is because we cried that night when we talked about it. We cried because we felt the hurt that must have gone through that family by these news. And I just still urge you to have that conversation because to me, it felt like it changed the entire course of my life and the one of our boys as well, you know.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
So when you got that call, how
Mhm.
long did it take for you to process what had happened?
I didn't really have time to process. I had the boys sitting downstairs in a living room. I live in an open plan house, so there wasn't even a door to between the conversation and them. Luckily, they didn't get any of that because they were immersed in their iPads and waiting for me to take them to Hapkido training. They both did martial arts at the time. We were both dressed in the uniform, and I have 7 steps down to the living room, and that's the amount of time I had to prepare for the news. I had no time
Wow.
to prepare, but I have to say, in my heart, I knew I had to tell the boys first. I had to tell them first, and there is no sugarcoating a message like your dad just passed. You cannot sugarcoat it. I had to pretty much tell them up straight, and the outcome was really it hit me like a wave. It hit me like a tsunami, I have to say. It was just, I was holding their hands and it was the first reaction was no, no, no. There was just denial from their end, and then there was crying, and then there was screaming, and the screaming was so unexpected. It really hit me, and all I could do was hug them and say, I know, I've got this." Like it was just one of the first questions my older son asked me was like, "Who's going to look after us now, Mum?" And I said, "I will. I will look after you." And later on, when I had time to process these in months and years to come, I realized how important it was for me just as well, to actually say that out loud. It was so important for the boys to hear that, for me to say it. And and then my 8-year-old at the time said, "I'm only 8 and I'm not going to have a daddy anymore." And he was crying as he said that. Oh, still now, 6 years later, I get really emotional when I think about that moment because it was so gut wrenching to hear that. And I said, I know. That's all I could say. I was just, you're lost for words. There's nothing intelligent that you can say. I have to say, I just opened my heart and whatever came out, I said, I just wanted them to feel safe. I just became lion mom instantly, which you are anyway, but even more so when it's just you.
I was going to say it's a really brave approach
Mm,
to have
thank
to
you.
put down the phone, walk 7 steps, and
Yeah.
tell your kids straight away.
Yeah.
Wow,
I knew I had
that's
to.
tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about your life, as in, how were you serving the world? Were you working? Were you a stay-at-home mum? Did you have what kind of
Mm.
hobbies or work did you have at the time?
At the time, I was already running a coaching business. I was 7 plus years into it, and I work predominantly with small business owners. I help them with their personal growth to achieve business growth. So everything was very much mindset based. And I feel it was such an amazing start for me to have these tools to be able to apply them to my own life when Rob passed. The first thing I did was I closed the business down. I had nothing left for any clients. I just really knew I needed to be there for the boys and myself. And, there was so much to do as well, the paperwork, and we had to fly across the country the next day to identify his body. There was just so much to organize, and the funeral, the celebration of life. And yeah, and in the same week that we had Rob's celebration of life, I walked down my younger son down the aisle for his first Holy Communion. So that was the most intense thing, not just going through the funeral through the celebration of life, but then being on my own, walking him down the aisle. I felt like all eyes were on us again because in such a small country town, everybody knew. And I had tears running down. It was the hardest thing to walk out there on my own, where I knew Rob was supposed to be with me right now, right here. And it was to be a happy day. And it was so heavy and so hard. And I tried to get my act together for him to be smiling, but he knew. Like, he's so, yeah, my boys both have a really high EQ as well as IQ. So it's just, they just knew. And with everything we've just been through, it was really intense to do that. But I have to say, from the get go, I felt so guided with every single step of the way, be that personal or business. It was really, I had such strong guidance, and I still feel it now. So I feel very blessed with that.
Is that a guidance from a higher power, or do you also feel Rob there?
I would definitely say Rob, as well as the higher power. I always felt that it's almost like Rob had prepared this entire path for me already. And I know that might sound weird for people who've never experienced that, but I don't feel weird saying that anymore at all. It's so normal for me now. I really feel that he's like my spiritual business manager, seriously. Yeah.
It's, I've heard someone say something similar, and I I think I can understand it. It's, as much as I can't fully, because I haven't been in your shoes, but the way you're
Yeah.
describing it, I'm understanding it as best I can, and really
Yeah.
connecting with that. Makes sense.
Thank you.
Tell me then about the journey from that time that you
Yeah.
had the funeral. What next? And then
Oh,
what happened
yeah.
after that?
So we had the funeral on a Wednesday, and on the Sunday, we had the Holy Communion. And I remember Sunday night, I had an absolute breakdown. I literally ended up on our kitchen floor screaming, primal screaming, whacking cupboard doors. It started off something little, the boys bickering, and I yelled out to them. And, it was such a very, very fast build up. And I remember saying, like, calling up to them because they were brushing their teeth and started to fight. And I said, I just need peace and quiet. And the moment I said that, it was like a valve had opened and I couldn't close it anymore. I kept saying that sentence over and over until I was screaming it and until it turned into primal screaming. And then I collapsed on the kitchen floor, and I couldn't even remember that moment how I collapsed. I just found myself on the kitchen floor, and then all of a sudden I had this jolting through my brain. I was like, "Oh my god, the boys!" They witnessed all of that, and I had instant, huge mother's guilt that they had to experience that after such a traumatic event anyway. And that to me was, I believe, the biggest turning point. It was so instant because I knew I would never want my boys to ever experience anything like that again. It was bad enough what they had gone through, but then to see, or not see, but witness, hear their mom collapse was horrible. So I sat down with them and I had this really calm, really intense conversation about emotions and what it can do to you. And I really tried to explain, and I even said to my little one, because he was hiding under the blanket, I said, "Were you scared?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "So was I." I was really scared when it happened. I did not see it coming. I did not expect anything like that to happen to me. I'm lying, mom. Nothing's going to happen to me. And then it did. And it was really horrible. So from there on in, I decided to work with a psychologist because I realized I've been looking after everybody else, in particular my kids, but not my own needs. And I knew I needed to see somebody to support me through this. And I found this most beautiful psychologist. Her name was Emily. And I remember one day I worked with her for about 4 or 5 months, and it was like a intense fast forward session every time I worked with her because of my background, because of my, already in the space of mindset. So my mind, my heart was wide open to anything she said to me, and I just soaked it up and went with it. And it was literally like a fast forward session every time. And I remember one day we sat in her office and I talked to her about all these expectations from our society, how you're supposed to fall apart, you're supposed to scream, you're supposed to be sad, you're supposed to not know what you're doing. And I said to her, this is not me. I want my boys to be happy. This is what I promised Rob. I don't want to be in this trench of sadness where everybody expects you to be. And she looked at me so calmly, I'll never forget this. And she said, so what does grief mean to you, Marie? And to my own surprise, the first word they came up was empowerment. And I was like, wow, that's unexpected. I don't know where that's coming from. But that's what grief meant to me, because in my entire life, including losing my dad at that young age and including childbirth times two, older moms will be able to relate to this. I had never experienced such an intense feeling of empowerment like through the death of my husband. Like all of a sudden being solely responsible for those two beautiful young lives we have created together. And that's what I connected to. That's what I held on to. That's what became my anchor, my driving force, my holding me up in the darkness, my everything. And when I had this realization, I looked at her and I said, wow, I think I need to write a book about this. And she said, I think you should. So I did. 5 weeks later, I had written and published my very first book, Loving Life After Loss. And to my own surprise, I woke up the next day and it had ranked in the top 100 bestseller list of Australia. And I was like, thanks, babe. I knew he had his hand in this. I was like, how on earth did this happen? I did not expect this. For me, it was more like a love legacy for Rob, like a story that I would want my boys to read one day when they're old enough. Or maybe some people can get something out of this. I would really like to share this, but I didn't expect that. That was way beyond my wildest expectations.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
And so the book idea was yours. It just
Yeah.
came to you. Yeah.
Yeah. It was my story. It was when I sat down writing, it was like a download. It was everything that we had just experienced. It was the whole,
Mm.
how did I meet Rob? How did we fall in love? How he passed and how I dealt with it. That was sort of in a nutshell the story. And I actually went traveling with the boys. We traveled around the world for 2 months. I wanted to be away for all these first milestones without him, the Christmas, New Year's, their birthdays are both in January. And while I was overseas, I had this feeling of, I've got something the world needs here. Like for the book to become a number one bestseller and rank in a top 100 list, there's something there that the world needs. So when I came back, I started a movement with the same title, Loving Love After Loss. And I ran this via a Facebook group and also with in person catch ups and healing journeys, programs, retreats. And I did this for about 5 years and took approximately 5,000 people onto their healing path. So that was one of the most intense journeys in my entire life, career wise. So I only just archived the movement in June last year. So in 2023. That's basically, yeah, that was a huge journey in a nutshell. And there was another book in there, Happy Healing, and there was my first TEDx talk in there, redefining our image of a widow. And there was my third book in there, which is a prompted journal called Sparks of Joy. So there was a lot packed into those 5 years. And
Mm.
I came out of the other end thinking, okay, what's next? I need to do something else. I got to the space where it was really, really intense and too intense for me to hold space for thousands of people in that group. I needed to step away from it. I had experienced one too many burnouts and I knew I needed to do it differently. I needed to shift the way I share my message with the world. So, yeah.
If you're loving this conversation and want to dive deeper into purposeful work, then it's time to thank the 6-Star Leaders community for making this episode possible. The 6-Star Leaders are a group of purpose-driven business owners committed to doing business differently by embracing their unique genius and skills to make a real impact. It's a space for learning, growth, and truly becoming empowered in everything that you do. If you're ready to discover your own 6th star, go to bit.ly/6-star community-intro and book a chat to learn more. We look forward to seeing you. Was there a particular moment over the past 6 years when you had a complete awareness or that aha moment saying, this is what I'm meant to be doing and this is why?
I think there were almost like mini milestones that got me further and further and further along that path. There was not one major moment, although when you ask me that, one thing does come to mind. There's a beautiful, beautiful spot at the beginning of the South Coast. Whoever is familiar with that, it's called Bald Hill. There's a lot of hang gliders jumping off, and this is my reflection point. So whenever I need to reflect, when I need a peace and quiet, I sit on Bald Hill, and sometimes I take a picnic rug. Sometimes I sit on a bench, but it's just so beautiful because you've got this amazing view, and it really changes your perspective, literally. And I did make the decision about starting the movement up there as well. I remember sitting with my previous web designer, who was also a friend of mine, and we talk about this, what I could do. And I was still sort of, tiptoeing around the actual topic, and I need to do something with transition, big transitions, and all of that. And then all of a sudden I looked at her and I was like, it's got to be grief, not transition, doesn't it? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, this is really confronting because, back then I did not consider myself an expert in grief. Nowadays, I definitely do. But back then I thought, who am I, to change the world in the world of grief? Who am I to teach somebody something? And then I got all these questions answered one by one. You have already shared your story, you've seen the response from people. And the more I sat with people and shared my view and my perspective on grief and how I feel we can deal with it in a much healthier way, more nurturing way, more healing way, I realized the response from people was always positive. Even the ones, there were little things in there where I felt this is a huge step up for me. And who am I to say something like that? So there was a lot of that in the growth process, actually. But every time when I took a really big step and I felt I might be leaning a little bit too far out of my comfort zone, people were absolutely besotted and grateful for the response or for the new perspectives I shared with them. And I thought, bit by bit, I'm like, I know what I'm doing here. I've got my mindset background. I've experienced my dad's loss. I've experienced my husband's loss. And then along the way, some really close people, my grandmother passed in our house when I was 12. So I had experienced loss from so many different levels. And I feel that I finally came to a point where I could see it from a really rather nurturing and healing perspective. And that to me was important enough to not keep that to myself. I really wanted to share this. So every time when I came up with something and I could get the positive response, I'm like, yeah, I'm on the right path. So it was literally from one milestone to the next. It was never one huge, this is now the milestone, this is the decision, and now everything. I felt really guided along the way with everything, single milestone. And it almost felt like only when I reached that one, I could see the next one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it feels
Yeah.
like you're constantly evolving and being guided where to go. And
Yeah.
all the way along, you are helping people, you're helping them heal.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
there's something in there for you that obviously
Mm,
it's what you're here to do, because you
yeah.
were helping people heal to a degree,
Yeah.
like personally, to
Yeah.
be better business owners
Mm,
before or past.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
you,
It really just evolved. The entire path just evolved. It was incredible how, when you look back, every step of the way was guiding me to where I am and who I am now. And like, the most beautiful part for me was when I stepped away from the movement. I did not do that lightheartedly or out of response to a burnout. I actually took 3 days off just on my own. I rented an Airbnb near the ocean. I just really went into reflection and deep, deep within to see if that's what I wanted to do or whether that was just a burnout response. And the answer was very clear that I wanted to do that. And then I actually went shortly after that, because that also fell into my lap after I did the 3 days away. I went to a shamanic 1 week retreat out in the Grampians near Melbourne, a couple of hours out of Melbourne. And it was such a beautiful ancient ceremony retreat where I went deep, deep within. Really, I sat with my ancestors, I sat with Rob. There was all these like really meditative practices. It was just incredible. And I got such clear guidance, even to the point where I knew the date when I wanted to close the movement, when I wanted to archive the group, I should say. And then I went into complete surrender. I really went like, okay, I have no idea what's next, but show me, And we went to Europe for 5 weeks. That was already booked and planned. It all worked out perfectly, timed. And when I came back, I was booked to speak at Camp Widows up in Brisbane. And they asked me if I would touch the topic of anger. Nobody else wanted to speak on it. I said, I'd be happy to. I love speaking on the topic. It is something that is so dear to my heart. And I spoke on stage. They said 15 to 20 people, usually for the workshop. I had about 70 or 80 people in the room, if not more. And I spoke on the topic of anger, and it felt like, I can't say it in any other words, it felt like healing from stage. It was so incredible. I could feel that energy dissolve in the room. I could feel the connections. I could feel like what the people said to me afterwards. It was just so beautiful. One lady even said to me, she came so angry, so angry. She didn't know what to do with the hatred she was feeling. And she said, I listened to you for an hour and it completely dissolved. It's gone. I can't feel it anymore. And I'm still in touch with her now. And it hasn't come back. It is just so beautiful to be able to contribute something like that when you have dealt with it yourself and you have found the solutions. It's almost like, how can you not share that? And I believe that that was the moment when I had the conversation with this particular lady, Michelle. She allowed me to mention her name and to use her as a testimonial, um, to see that this was my answer. This is what I wanted to do going forward. So I decided more or less there and then, or in the days and weeks to come, to become a keynote speaker. And this is my topic now. The power of grief is my keynote. And I love what I share. I really do. It's so empowering. It's so beautiful. It's so healing and nurturing. And I believe that's what the world needs.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
What was really clear to me as you were sharing the steps and the journey and going to the
Yeah.
shamanic healing retreat and the
Mm.
process you went through, I was thinking to myself, she's just surrendering to the process. And then you
Yeah.
said, and I sat and
Oh, was
surrendered
it
to the process.
deep surrender?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's really interesting, just how you've approached everything. And I'm just reflecting on my own journey and others' journeys and how
Mm.
we can hold resistance at certain points. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying here that you're not resisting anything, because as humans, we do
Oh,
resist things
yes, we
unconsciously
do.
all the time. Yet I'm marveling at your ability to go on this windy journey without knowing where it's
Mm.
really taking you, being guided,
Mm.
full of trust.
Yeah. Thank
And I
you.
was wondering, could you speak to that a little bit for people? Because I think there's something in there for people to really learn from.
Yeah. I actually want to share something that is really personal, but I have shared it a couple of times now, and I think this is really the perfect moment to say that and speak on this as well, because something happened only literally a couple of weeks into Rob's passing, and back then I remember it feeling so big and so intense and so sacred that I wasn't ready to speak on it back then. Now it has become something so normal for me, so accepting, like fully accepted, wholeheartedly accepted, that I would like to share it. I had this epiphany where I felt Rob and I have chosen this path on a soul level. And that was absolutely mind blowing and beautiful. And there was also, it was bittersweet, if that makes sense. There was this moment of, oh my God, I just can't believe that this is what we have chosen. Yet at the same time, it gave me so much. I don't even have the right word for it. It gave me so much. That's what I'm going to leave it at. It was just something that felt really healing to me. The realization that Rob and I had a soul contract, and that's what we decided to experience in this lifetime together. And that to me was the biggest gift and the most beautiful act of love, that he had chosen that path for me to do what I do today. And I don't know how many people will understand that, But to me, it has become something so normal that I'm now able and willing to talk about this and share this. And I also feel that this understanding, this realization has helped me grow tremendously from a spiritual level, from an acceptance and healing perspective. And this is something that I often now share and incorporate in my retreats or in my healing journeys that I do with people because it is so needed. This understanding of that we do choose things on a soul level. And from a human perspective, we just often don't remember. But there was this remembering from a soul level that was really sacred to me and really beautiful. And that has guided me along the way. That's why I'm like, Rob's my spiritual business coach here. Is yeah, business advisor, I should say. Mm,
So beautiful. And
thank you.
really awesome that you got it so early in
Yeah,
the journey after he passed to
yeah,
enable you to have that, just that empowerment and
thank
that
you.
gift, like you said.
Yeah, it was a huge gift. I was not ready to share it at that stage. I really needed to
Mm,
come to terms with it and also learn to understand what that actually meant. That took me
mm,
quite some time. I think it took me at least probably a year and a half before I was willing to start talking about it. But for me internally, it helped me tremendously to heal, to accept, to learn, to grow. Yeah.
mm. How long did it take you to get through your own grief after Rob's passing?
Mm. That's a bit of a how long is a piece of string question because the thing is, and I think it's a really important question that you asked me here because so many people live with this understanding or misunderstanding, I want to call it, that grief will last forever. I don't see it that way. For me, I treat grief like a visitor. That's how I like to put it. I don't see grief as a permanent resident in our house. So, grief, every now and then it visits, that sometimes comes through a movie that triggers something or through something that you find going through your stuff. And then all of a sudden there's this, I'm going to show you. I can't believe I've got it right there. This one. This journal, I was walking downstairs and downstairs underneath my bedroom, there's a bookshelf, and this journal was standing out, but literally half. It was just hanging out, and I thought, What is that book?" I could only see the back of it. There's nothing written on it. I'm like, "What is that book, and why is it standing out?" And I grabbed it and I opened it, and I thought, "Wow, it's got Rob's handwriting in it." I'm like, "This is my husband's journal." I'm like, "Oh my god!" And I'm looking through it, and there's only like 11 pages and everything is about family and our relationship and all his values and how much it means to him. And I was like, oh my god, this is just divine timing. I found it a couple of months ago when I went to the immersion weekend to write my keynote speech. That was in October last year. So I went downstairs and I found that just before I went away. I'm like, here's my journal that I need for the weekend. Perfect. I'm going to use just that. And it's just so ideal. But there's little things that happen that are triggers, that are little knock on the door, his grief knocking. And I allow grief in and I sit with her and I might cry with her or laugh with her or journal with her and have a cup of tea with her, sit in the sun. And then I bid her farewell, say thank you for coming, but you don't live here anymore. I refuse to let grief dictate our lives. I want to have our life dictated by the choices we make, by the choices how we deal with grief, how we allow happiness and joy back into our lives, because that's what life is all about. And that's what I promised Rob. I promised him I would create the happiest life possible for the boys and I. And that to me is showing how much I loved him. There is this myth that you have to portray the amount of love that you have for your person with the amount of grief that you show to the world. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I don't have to hide my grief either, but I'm allowed to be happy. And I know that's what Rob would want for me, and that's what I would want for him. So that's what I do.
Did you find through the years, or certainly after his passing, that other people around you had very different views on how you should be or act? And how did you deal with
Absolutely.
that?
I had a very beautiful learning out of that because there's another myth I want to bust here. And a lot of people said to me, and at first I agreed with that, now I don't anymore. There was this, oh, in adversity, you learn how who your true friends are. And at first I thought it was, yeah, that's correct, but it's actually not. I felt what you learn in adversity is how people grieve differently, and that's okay. And when I was in the depths of my grief, I had no capacity for other people's grief around Rob. I couldn't see theirs. I wasn't able to understand theirs, that they were grieving Rob as well. They're his best friends, his family. They were all grieving Rob differently to what I did, what we did. And rather than going into judgment and, telling or thinking that they're doing it wrong, I really wanted to come to that point where I'm like, no, everybody just grieves differently. And as much as I want people to maybe not even understand, but at least accept the way that I grieve, the way that I do grieve differently, that's exactly the same that I need to do for others. I need to be able to say, you know what, they are grieving differently. And some people uh, don't know how to ever get out of it. And I need to accept that too. I can't tell them they need to get out of grief or turn to happiness or allow joy in if that's not in their capacity. There's no judgment from my end. There's just holding space and opening my heart and my mind, and whoever is ready to come and come with me or let me guide them or let me help them or let me just hold space for them. Um, I'm here, but I can't force anyone. So when people ask me, can you help everyone in grief? I always say, I can help everyone who wants to be helped. Absolutely. I have absolute confidence that I can help anyone with any style of grief uh, if they're willing to heal. A lot of people think they're not allowed to heal because it would be disrespectful to the person they have lost. And that's a part I don't agree with. It's not disrespectful. It's exactly what that person would want for you, no matter who they are, whether that's your child, your husband, your dad, your anyone. It doesn't matter what the relationship is. And I really mean that these days. I was so hesitant to say that years ago. Now I'm not anymore. It doesn't depend on the relationship you had with the person who passed, including children. And that's a really big point. That was a really big turning point for me to learn to understand that.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's such a big topic. I can see,
Yeah.
there's so many facets to it. Like you've said, everyone
Yeah.
has their own grief style
Mm.
and bring all their own stuff into that healing process.
Yeah.
And I think it's really wonderful that you are able to hold space or have held
Mm.
space for people
Thank
and
you.
understanding all of the different bits that make up each individual person. It's real
Yeah.
true
Yeah.
acceptance and
Thank you.
love. And it's a beautiful gift that you're giving to people. Really
Thank you
is.
so much. Yeah.
Got a question. Looking back over the last 6 years, what's been the
Mm.
most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself?
That's a really good question. What came to mind was a couple of years before Rob died. I remember one moment we were leaving the house and I was standing in front of our entrance door and I said to Rob, I have this vision that keeps coming back to me of me standing in front of thousands of people speaking. And at that stage, I was petrified of public speaking. I could not see myself ever picking that as a career. And I've already been doing a lot of speaking online, and that didn't phase me. I'm very comfortable in front of the camera, but being in front of an audience of hundreds of thousands of people, that was very different to me back then. And I kept having this vision of standing on stage, and I said, I don't even know what my message would be. I know that it's got something to do with love and connection, and he just smiled and he's like, "Yeah, I could see yourself do that." And I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "This is so bizarre." And it was such a fleeting moment, but in hindsight, it kept coming back to me. And in particular, when a couple of years later, I was standing in front of 500 people, and delivering the speech of my lifetime about love and connection. It was at Rob's funeral. So that to me went way beyond a eulogy. I just wanted to leave people with something. I wanted to leave people with something to reconsider their level of awareness that they were living their lives with at that time. And so many people came back to me afterwards at the celebration of life or weeks or months after that and said, your speech changed so much for me. Your speech changed my life. People have made changes in their relationships, have made changes in their careers, and they kept coming to me and telling me about it. And I was like, I can't believe I did this. And I can't believe I had this vision. So that really came as a massive surprise to me. I would have never thought that A, I would do it, and B, through what circumstances, if that makes sense.
Mm. Uh,
Yeah.
I love the way that, we circle back and there's breadcrumb
Yeah.
trails along the
Yeah.
path that give us little
Incredible.
clues and prepare us for where we are.
Yeah.
Um,
The hindsight, hey?
what's been, the hindsight's such a valuable thing. Tell me how you've changed your life for your boys since
Mm.
Rob's passing.
I am so much more relaxed than I used to be. I'm so much more, let's just have fun, like, the boys love it. Like, not that I was ever a really strict parent, but there were rules in our household, and it's also not that there are not any rules anymore. But what changed so massively is our perspective on life. Often there's, I hope nobody's listening to that from my son's school, but sometimes there are things coming home from school where I'm like, really, really, like when you have lost your person and when you are 8 and 10 years old and you lose your dad and you grow up just with your mom and you adjust and you grow and you become resilient and you become absolutely freaking beautiful and incredible human beings. And then somebody gives you caution after caution because you haven't got your shirt tucked in. I look at that and I'm like, I just don't get your perspective. I understand they're going to Catholic school and there are rules. I get that. But I shake my head and I just laugh and I sign it and let's just get on with it. Life's just way too precious to get hung up on a tucked in or hung out shirt. It's little things like that. Our perspective is just so much more on the things that really matter, the quality time, the love that we have, the things we do together, traveling together around the world, like talking about really intense experiences, like going for night drives to have the conversations that you don't want to have during daytime, things like that that really matter. That's
Mm.
like anybody listening to this now, what really matters in your life, just focus on that. Because we often don't. We get so hung up in rules and regulations, and all rules make sense. They're all there for a reason. But my key message is just focus on what really matters in life and do that. Have more fun, have more joy, roll around in the dirt, in the garden, in the snow, whatever you can do. Go for a night swim in the ocean. Do something that makes you alive and happy and yeah, I feel like a preacher now, but life's way too precious,
No.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was right there with you on the night drive, swimming in the ocean, rolling around in the
Yeah.
in the snow. It's true though, and hearing
Yeah.
that message from you, because you really answered the next question I was going to ask, which is around what would be a message that you would like to give to people now,
Mm,
because you've learnt the fragility of
yeah.
life.
The message that instantly came to me is actually coming from Rob. He was the one who taught me about the concept of two choices, and he always said it was such a cheeky smile on his face when I was in a bad mood or whatever. He's always like, two choices, babe, and he would just smile at me, and I'm like, yeah, you're so right. In every single second or moment of your life, you have the choice whether you focus on the positive or the negative, whether you frown or laugh or smile or shout out or just go with the flow. It's just, he was the one who taught me this whole don't sweat the small stuff. Really focus on the things that are important in life, that are necessary, that are beautiful. Focus on the healing, the love around you. Once you start doing that, you just can't stop focusing on it. It just really amplifies. And it's your choice what you focus on. Whatever you focus on grows. We all know that. That, you know, where energy goes, where the focus goes, energy flows, grows, whatever.
That's
You know what
yeah.
I mean. Yeah.
Absolutely. Totally with you.
Focus on love.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
How important is living on purpose to you?
12 out of 10.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Mm,
Beautiful.
thank you.
What does the next couple of years look like for you?
Speaking. Really, I have my highest value right now is intentional education. I really want to share this message with people how they can have such a different approach to dealing with grief. I'm not one to say, don't grieve, don't cry, don't be unhappy. But I'm really, really big on before you lose your person, life exists out of happy and sad moments. It always coexists. There's never only just one or the other. So why do we change that once a person dies? There's even more so a reason to focus more on the happy moments. And for me, it's this message of it can all coexist. Don't just stay stuck in the sadness and the tears and the this is tearing my heart apart. Focus on the beautiful memories, focus on the things that you created together and let that grow, let that continue to grow and not just, we planted seeds together. Like, beautiful comparison with our boys. I always have this running gag, like when people compliment on them, I always say hashtag made with love. But I really mean it. They were created in love. I want them to grow in love and not in sadness. And I think that's the main message that I really want to convey to the world.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a very
Yeah.
beautiful message. I love
Thank
what you're
you.
doing. And such a, I was about to say it's not a sad story. It's actually a beautiful story of humanity and
Yeah.
acceptance and love. And I
Yeah.
I agree with you. Rob and you had that soul contract, and through
Mm,
his passing, he fulfilled that contract. And now
yeah.
you've got to do yours.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
Yes, I am. Mm, I love
Well,
it. Thank you for that wrap up. That's beautiful.
how can people see or hear more of what you're talking about and your work?
Yeah. I think the easiest is just to go to my website. It's mariealessi.com, so my first name and last name. And there's a resource page in there where they can see pretty much everything I do. I've written these books. I've got my TEDx talk on there. There's my speaker one sheet on there for those who want to hear me speak to their audience. But I've also got, lunch and learns for grief in the workspace or family bereavement sessions. A lot of people ask me, do I work with families? I absolutely love doing that because it's just so beautiful and so sacred to hold space for a family who's gone through that, knowing where they can be. And
Mm,
that is just, yeah. So you'll find all of that on mariealessi.com.
that's beautiful. Thank you. And we'll have your links in the show notes below the video, wherever you're watching this.
Thank you.
Marie,
Mm.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for showing up, for coming into my world, for being here, and for
Mm.
being you.
Aveline, thank you so much for having me. I loved our pre-chat and I loved our conversation here even more so. So thank you for holding space for me. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Mission Activated. If today's conversation resonated with you, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Remember, your mission matters. When you live on purpose, not only do you transform your own life, but you inspire others to do the same. Until next time, stay aligned, keep activated. I'll see you then.